Stop the presses, folks. We might be closer to a Hulkenberg podium. And his teammate would be Esteban Ocon? Could Sauber really be in line to pinch these two drivers for 2025? And Nico was a candidate for the Sauber seat next year. But the trouble is, though, is that Gunther Steiner didn't really want to get rid of him because he's the closest guy to actually scoring points. So they actually took out that 1+1 option on his contract. It really adds credence to the fan theory that Haas tends to favour one car over the other. We had Schumacher being favoured over Mazepin, we had Magnussen being favoured in front of Schumacher, and now we're having it with Hulkenberg being favoured over Magnussen. Hulkenberg has been the apple of Sauber's eye over the last few years, but Ocon? Really? I really don't see where that came from, but I mean, I suppose Ocon might be sick and tired of the furore around Gasly and Alpine's descent into the midfield, and this brand new project might be quite good for actually getting with a very big outfit, and Toto Wolff does like to see the best interests for his drivers, so maybe he might be able to get Ocon a seat there. Get in on the ground floor when Sauber are a little bit middling, a bit and then maybe they might actually be able to ride the gravy train for 2026 when Audi comes in full time. There have been loads of drivers speculated for that seat. About 3/4 of the grid are going to have contracts up next year, so nobody really knows. And Ocon with the Sauber group? What? I might make my theory about Mick Schumacher going to Alpine for 2025 all the more likely, partnering with Gasly. You can watch my video here about that theory to hear more. But this is a very weird theory, and this is the big talking point going into the Mexican Grand Prix. Aside from the fact that Mercedes got themselves horribly wrong with their wood. And there's a joke in there, but I will refrain from actually going anywhere near it. But what about Bottas and Zhou? Well, I feel like Sauber's kind of settling for them this year, because you heard all of the gossip, which I talked about in this video here, that Nico Hulkenberg they wanted for 2024, and Pourchaire was close to a deal for 2024, but ultimately lost out to Zhou, because Zhou comes with a lot of cash. Bottas does have a big fan base, so why not have him in there? Even though they've really not set the world alight, and Alfa Romeo is dangerously close to being in last place, and nowhere near actually getting in front of Williams at the moment. They both seem to run on luck, those two teams. So I feel like at the end of next year, they will go Sauber and Audi to Bottas and Zhou. So long, and thanks for all the cash, because Zhou has a lot of cash, and Bottas has a lot of fans, and I really don't see a future for either of them at the moment, unless they get very lucky, because it is a very big mystery with the 2025 grid. I feel like a big change in the lineup will be coming for that team in 2025. Now, of course, you've got to talk about Checo here. He really needs to impress, since this is definitely his home track. Heck, the track's on the calendar because of Sergio Perez and his popularity and his underdog status back in 2015. Ever since then, he has been an absolute favourite, and this is a track he is pretty good at too. He has been on the podium the last 2 years, so I think he stands a good chance of doing it again. But I do not see him troubling the likes of Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen. It's going to be a distant third, and only just ahead of George Russell, but he will do enough to just squeak onto the podium and limit the gap between himself and Hamilton. Sure, Hamilton will actually finish ahead of him, but because of the fact that Hamilton got disqualified for the Mercedes snafu and Toto Wolff being an absolute planker, Checo's advantage over Hamilton will still be bigger than it was at the end of the Qatar Grand Prix. And so long as he can keep within striking distance of Hamilton, the gap slowly being eroded away, that will be enough. There's only 4 races left, so he might just keep second place, but he definitely needs to get a good result. Third place will probably be the most he can actually hope for, but that might be enough to secure second place and maybe his future. Now, speaking of Mercedes, this is definitely going to be a good weekend for them. For starters, they have learnt a lot from the Austin Grand Prix. The upgrade that they bought, the floor, does work, and it definitely gives them hope for 2024 that the W15 will actually be very, very good. And a complete change of form that they've had from the last 2 years, and George might get a car that could actually win fairly consistently, or at least better than it has the last 2 years. All of this is dependent on the fact they can actually understand and not underestimate their newfound abilities for their suck. The Mercedes engine doesn't seem to be affected by the high altitude either, and you don't get reduced performance of the ICE really affecting it. That and the Mercedes car really likes its low-speed corners. It's really good on the front, so I feel like all of the technical stuff, Mercedes will really excel in and not be far behind Red Bull. The Ferrari-powered cars and the Renault cars will probably be at a disadvantage here. Mercedes will be the second fastest car here. Hamilton will also be keen to capitalise on their floor upgrade, which was a good addition, and with the extra time to dial in the setup, we could see another podium from Lewis. That is providing that Mercedes can get a top on the fact that they are really bad at pit stops. Look at this graphic right here. It's a really interesting one, and credit to the one who actually created it. That Mercedes, they are really terrible at pit stops. They have only had 1 of 59 pit stops this season so far that have been less than 2.5 seconds in time. I've seen many pit stops from Mercedes where it's been around about 3 seconds. You look at Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, they get pit stops all the time under 2.5 seconds. Heck, McLaren holds the pit stop record of 1.8 seconds. Mercedes, they are nowhere. They cannot rest on their laurels. And I remember seeing a comment from Toto, I don't remember where, but it was like, oh, we've been a really good team for the last 12 years, so we don't need to worry about pit stop times. Yeah, you do, mate. You need to claw back every other time. The responsibility then has to be on the drivers to make up the deficit in the pit stops. Everything has to work, Toto. Everything has to work, not just the drivers. You can't rely on Hamilton's talent alone. Hey, on a lighter note, Frederik Vesti is actually going to be taking up an FP1 slot, so we can actually see the Mercedes rookie, the talent that they really like, actually getting some time on the F1 circus. But this is all coming off the bat that Kimi Antonelli, their other big child prodigy, is actually the first F2 2024 driver actually confirmed for Prema and has been rushed into F2. So, this is bad timing, folks. I feel like Frederik Vesti will be swept under the rug due to the fact that this guy is coming up the ranks very quickly. Oh dear. And like I just touched upon, the teams that are going to be swept away hard this weekend, any teams powered by Ferrari engines and the Renault team. So that's just Alpine there. That's 2/5 of the entire grid compromised by the fact that this circuit is very high. Haas are going to fall down hard here because of the Ferrari power unit deficit and the fact that their upgrades have really not worked at all, and they have really got to go back to the drawing board. And it'll probably take them a couple of Grand Prix to actually figure out that if they can salvage anything from these upgrades. They can't have a normal year of upgrade paths, can they? Alfa Romeo, they've been anonymous this year, so I don't really expect anything different, so it'll be very lucky to get one of their cars into Q2 and anything above 13th. And as for Ferrari themselves, they'll be very lucky to get into the top 5. I envisaged them maybe getting 7th and 8th maybe, because of the fact that their car seems to be okay in the low speed corners, but I really don't see them actually coping well down the straight, and if a Williams gets behind them, I see them overtaking them. And Charles Leclerc's really got no clue about how good their car will be anyway at the best of times because he's given up trying to guess where they'll be. And Alpine, will they be bad? Well, I mean, they were already down on power as it was at the best of times, so I don't see it being any better here. I will be astonished if one of those Alpine cars gets into Q3. I really will be. Well, how about your home team McLaren? How do you think they will do? Well, I'm not seeing a podium here, folks. In fact, I think Aston Martin will claw back some of the deficit that they've lost from McLaren over the last few races, maybe even get 4th place back, because that upgrade that they brought to Austin worked. It worked a lot. Sure, Lance Stroll was still slower than Fernando Alonso, but it was by a very small margin, less than a 10th. So if you get Alonso dialed in with that upgrade, he will actually be a very strong contender for the top 5. So I feel like McLaren are going to be struggling here. I do not see a Lando Norris podium. I feel that even Piastri might struggle to get into Q3. This track, despite having a very long straight, is very technical. Lots of low speed corners, and that is the McLaren's weakness. Sure, they have managed to claw back some of the deficit they have to other teams, but it's still an issue that this current car has to deal with. There are very few high-speed corners here, and I feel like McLaren are going to struggle. Lando will get into Q3, yes, but I feel like it's going to be maybe the P6 or P7 or something like that. Alonso might have the advantage here, and he might be able to claw back some dignity over his ill-timed comment about McLaren being over-exaggerated or something like that. And, yeah, that was really badly timed, but if he said that this weekend and Aston Martin did better, it probably would have actually been a little bit more relevant and apt. But yes, I think this is going to be another wake-up call for Oscar Piastri as well. I really don't see him doing well here. Williams might be on for a point or two as well. That long straight will be great for defending if Albon can somehow pull that car into Q3 at the Alpine's expense. And what about Logan? Could he get a point as well? Well, possibly, but I don't think it's going to be a guaranteed point. This track is very technical and very tricky, so I feel like Logan won't really be on course for a point here, but he could be on for a solid position, or at least be able to defend from other cars, because again, that Williams is very fast down straights, and this is the longest straight on the calendar, where you can get to the highest top speeds. Thanks to Bottas, Williams has the F1 speed record at this track. So they could be really good here at defending, or maybe using the DRS, and yeah, they'll just motor past, and then sure, the other cars will actually get them back in the technical bit, but they'll be able to repeat and repeat and repeat. But yeah, Albon I think is on for a point or two, definitely. Logan, maybe 12th. So okay, let's get to the predictions proper. I have not really talked about Red Bull all that much because there's really not much to talk about. Max Verstappen is going to win, of course he will. And folks, booing any driver is not classy at all, and don't even bother with Max Verstappen because he simply doesn't care. In fact, he probably feeds on the negative energy. You're only making it worse. And as for Lewis Hamilton, I definitely think he's on course for second place here. He seems motivated by these upgrades, but I don't think it's going to be as close as it was in Austin. He'll probably be about like 10 seconds behind Verstappen, but he will be definitely far ahead of Checo. He will be very, very solid here, and I feel like he'll be motivated by the upgrades, the fact that they actually work, and the low-speed corners, the front tyres, ooh, I think it's going to be good. Oh, speaking of tyres, the fact that we're actually having the softest compounds here, that's just going to make the Ferrari situation even worse. But I feel like Checo will be on for third place yet again. Third place in a row. That'll be fine, and I think he'll take that. He'll only have lost a few points from Hamilton, and considering his post-summer break deficit to Verstappen, I think he'll take a podium at the very least. So George isn't going to be on the podium as well? I've really not seen anything recently that George has been able to capitalize on getting anywhere near the podium. He's had some really scruffy races, and sure, Qatar was really good for him, and he was able to claw back from 18th to 4th place. But I really don't have any confidence in his ability to maybe get onto the podium because Hamilton, he is on it, and Checo does have the home advantage here. So I'm not really confident about giving him a third place or a second place or anything like that, or at least getting one over his teammate. Fifth place? I don't think it's going to be Norris. I think it's going to be Fernando. Fernando will be on it. He'll have had some time to dial in with these upgrades, and based on the fact that we actually heard some good stuff from Aston Martin, and they're really confident about these upgrades, this floor seems to be something they can dig, and they've actually managed to get rid of some of their drag. In the speed traps at Austin, Aston Martin were near the top. Stroll topping it. If they can qualify well, will be on for a top 5 finish. Alonso probably edging it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Stroll gets in the points as well. But going back to what I said at the beginning regarding Alfa Romeo and Sauber and Audi, I feel like they are really in a tricky situation about where they're actually going to be going in the next few years or so. You can actually find out what I think is going on with Alfa Romeo Sauber right now and where the future might go.